Good morning, everyone. This is Catherine Joy Selvakumari, Assistant Professor in Department of Physical Education, JJ College of Arts and Science, Pudukkottai. Today, I am here to take a portion from Athletic Care and Rehabilitation. In this subject, we are about to discuss what are sports injuries and its classification. What do you know about sports injuries? These injuries which happens during the training or competitions. It is most common issue in all the field games and sports. Today we are going to discuss how injuries occur and how it is classified, which will help us to know about the injuries so that we can know how to give first aid and take the injured person for treatment. Coming to the classification of sports injuries, it is classified into three major categories, that is, soft tissue injuries, bone injuries, joint injuries. Soft tissue injuries are further classified into contusion, strain, sprain, abrasion, and bruises. Let us see about the soft tissue injuries in brief. First one is contusion. These injuries are caused by direct hit with or without equipment. You can identify it through swelling and stiffness in the injured area. Sometimes you may have bleeding too. It is very common in the game of boxing, wrestling and kabaddi. The second one in the soft tissue injury is strain. These occurs due to a clash during practice session or during a competition session. It can cause mild as well as severe muscle injury. Strain can also lead to muscle rupture too. You can't even move the injured part due to severe pain. It is mostly common in the game of soccer, football, hockey. Abrasion. It is a skin injury. It is usually caused by the friction with an instrument or equipment or a fall. It usually happens where the bone is close to the skin. It occurs in the upper layer of the skin. Bruises. Bruises are the injuries which makes the injured part of the body discolored. This discoloration of the injured part is commonly red to blue or dark purple. This is due to the rupturing of the underlying blood vessels. It is usually caused by a blow or an impact by an equipment or during a combat games. Sprain. It is very common and we usually know about sprain and we use the word sprain in our day-to-day activities also. It is a common ligament injury caused by overstretching of muscles. It occurs in the wrist and ankle joint, and you can see there will be an inflammation, swelling in the injured part. Pain and tenderness are the common symptoms of sprain. These are the 5 classification of soft tissue injuries. The next major classification of sports injuries is the bone injuries. Bone injuries are mostly commonly the fractures. Let us see the types of fractures in detail. Fractures can be classified into simple fracture, compound fracture, complicated fracture, green stick fracture, comminuted fracture, impacted fracture, depressed fracture. Simple fracture are the fractures without any wound. It is not complicated, it can be treated easily. Compound fracture are fractures where the skin and the muscles are damaged. The broken bones protrude outside, tearing the skin, causing bleeding and severe pain to the injured person. Complicated fracture. These are the fractures which lead to damage of tissues, nerves, arteries. It is common in high jump and pole vault game. Green stick fracture. These are common in children with weak and delicate bones. It can also bend on any stress too. Comminuted fracture. It is where the bone is broken into two or more pieces. It is very complicated also. It is common in the cycle and motor races where they collide with an accident and the bones are broken into two or more pieces. Impacted fracture. Impacted fracture or when a fractured bone enters into another bone. So it is like overriding the another bone. The bone gets into the another bone. This is called as impacted fracture. Depressed fracture. Usually it is found in the skull. Here the broken part of the bone goes down below the normal level. It just creating a opening and just in the skull. The third major categories of sports injury is joint injuries. They are classified into dislocation of shoulder joint, dislocation of lower jaw, dislocation of hip joint. The first one, the dislocation of shoulder joint. It occurs due to a sudden jerk or a fall on a hard surface. Here the end of the humerus comes out from the socket. The second one in the joint injuries is dislocation of lower jaw. It occurs when the chin strikes to another surface or an object. It also happens when the mouth is opened excessively. Dislocation of hip joint. It occurs when the end of the femur bone is displaced from the socket. It is caused due to putting maximum strength spontaneously. Mostly this occurs for the old age people. So today what we have seen is about the what is sports injuries and the classification of the sports injuries. Coming to the conclusion and the recap of what we have discussed today about sports injuries and the classification of sports injuries. We have to know sports injuries. These happens during the practice session or competition. It is classified into three major categories, that is soft tissue injuries, bone injuries, joint injuries. Soft tissue injuries are further classified into contusions, sprains, strain, abrasion, bruises. Bone injuries are classified into simple fracture, compound fracture, complicated fracture, green stick fracture, comminuted fracture, impacted fracture, depressed fracture. Joint injuries are classified into dislocation of shoulder joint, dislocation of hip joint, dislocation of lower jaw. So now we will be able to have a clear-cut idea about what is sports injuries and the classification of sports injuries. Hope you all understood the class. Thank you very much.